New York projects by Tom Snow, and he is from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Tom, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you. And thank you, Joanna. I know I'd spoken to you, about a month or so ago, maybe a little bit longer, regarding the Resilient New York program. I think if folks, I see a number of familiar faces, or at least names. Mark, it's good to see your face, Gaston. If you recall, we spent a fair amount of time, I don't know, maybe a year, maybe 2 years it's been. Actually, we started out in Erie County. We launched, I think it was 7 flood studies that essentially covered almost the entire Erie County, under the Resilient New York Streams program. For those that were not involved in that, those were studies, flood and ice jam studies that were conducted on a watershed-wide basis, basically looking at the entire watershed to identify particular areas that were known and are subject to chronic routine flooding and or ice jams. And we developed, did a fairly comprehensive analysis, hydraulic analysis. We did quite a bit of a outreach to folks, again, number of folks on this call here today, with the communities, with the county representatives. I know Joanna was on, I think, at every one of them. Of course, our DEC staff were involved as well from our flood section, as well as, I see Don's on, Shannon's on, and Stephanie. They were all part of that as well. So now that I guess my reason for my interest in wanting to speak with folks here today was, now that we got these flood studies done, we don't want to see them sit on the shelf. We want to see what can be done to actually take those studies and the recommendations, the specific flood recommendations, and those vary depending on which watershed you're in. A lot of them included or identified undersized bridges, culverts, areas where there could be reconnecting the stream to its floodplain restoration work. And many of these studies, included a fairly robust suite, if you want, specific location-wide recommendations for the communities to implement at the local level. And I guess given that we have, today, I think I just saw a press release. There was potentially in the budget an additional $1 billion going into the Bridge New York program, which in other areas where we've identified, where we've done flood studies, particularly out in the Mohawk, a number of the flood studies identified undersized bridges and culverts, and those got funneled through the Bridge New York program, and those projects are actually being implemented today. Again, the reason why I wanted to touch base with folks here today is to, again, let you know that these studies are done. But again, I don't want to just do a study for the sake of doing a study. My goal is to actually, or I hope our collective goal is to actually get projects in the ground. So I guess I wanted to take this opportunity to ask folks on the Water Quality Coordinating Committee, how do we go about best engaging the communities to undertake some of the projects, or get them even, get them interested, because we all realize that this isn't going to happen unless there's local support for it. So, we'll use Buffalo Creek, for example. I know Buffalo Creek, I think it's the town of West Seneca, is proceeding forward, has been proceeding forward with the design of a floodplain bench. I haven't checked with Catherine Winkler at the Buffalo River Niagara Waterkeeper to see what the status is of that, but my understanding is that's progressing or going forward, which is great. But what I was hoping is that I could impress upon folks here today that there is quite a few different funding sources available. Probably some of the most amount of money available for flood-related work is available now, here today, right now. And I just don't want to see an opportunity pass us all by where there is funding available, a study's been done, it's identified specific projects, and all we essentially need to do collectively, and this is one of the questions I wanted to ask folks, is how do we get the municipalities interested in wanting to move forward? I know in other areas that I've worked in, again, there has to be that local interest buy-in in order to do it. And I just haven't had enough work experience in Erie County to see about what is the best approach to getting the localities engaged and, I don't know, for lack of better terms, jazzed about going forward and actually, taking some of these recommendations and transforming them into actual projects. So I guess I'm going to be straightforward and ask, does anybody have any thoughts or ideas on how we may be able to accomplish that?
Yeah,
Okay,
Tom,
open it up to the
I
floor.
can kind of comment on this a little bit. So being familiar with a number of them, the reports that were completed, the sheer volume in Erie County that were completed lends it to some difficulty, right off the bat. So for an agency such as myself, who could potentially assist in fostering projects like this through, essentially what I'm looking at is to, I need to sift through each and every one of those reports and essentially pull out what I feel are going to be the highest priority or the highest bang for the buck, so to speak, of what I've, heard in the community, or, folks that are calling us or, asking for assistance. And from there, it's essentially the municipalities. And I know at this point, a year and a half down the road here, we probably have some turnover in regards to some of the municipal officials. So it's basically, presenting, making sure that they know that this was completed. Here's some of the opportunities. Here's some of the, funding sources that we can apply to. And essentially, they're going to be looking for someone to hold their hand through the process.
Right.
That's the bottom line of it is, it's a little outside their comfort zone as a municipal official, or so they're going to be looking for a Waterkeeper or a Soil and Water District or LUPA or, some other agency folks to try to shepherd it through and how to organize it and package it in a way that they can put a grant application together. I think that's really what I'm looking at, and I'm already looking at. I've got projects in and around a couple of the areas that I'm really taking a closer look at, whether or not we can accommodate or do a coordinated effort. But I already have project work in and around a couple of the areas that we're looking at. So whether or not I'm going to take a more active role in it from the Soil and Water District perspective, that's definitely a possibility in a couple of the areas.
Well, that's great, Mark. I would very much welcome, again, I don't know if there are others that would be interested in sort of serving, kind of doing the same thing that you're proposing to do, again, kind of delving into these to see what sort of projects, from, in many cases, it's not all, low town and village. In some cases, it's the county has, bridges. So I don't know if, if folks have had a conversation with the Erie County DPW, I know, to see what their priorities are with regards to, I know, some of the infrastructure that's identified as being problematic is owned, at the county level as well. So I don't know if we could replicate you, Mark. Can we clone you out in Erie County? Is there any other folks that would, along similar lines as to what, Mark, you're suggesting could be accomplished?
And that's part of the process is like you look at how many different agencies or how many different municipalities or the counties that are involved, then you throw the landowners potentially on top of that. And it's a lot of coordination.
Yep, absolutely.
So, and this is kind of, I guess, what I mean by a coordinated punch list. So, you got to have someone who's familiar with the areas to kind of sift through it to say, okay, I think, X, Y, and Z are the I guess the hottest spots, so to speak, right. And, put that punch list together for the county so they know, okay, well, here's a list of the bridges that we should be cautious of, you know, where are they in the process, or, you know, within their, you know, their maintenance realm, or are they anticipated? Because I can tell you there's probably one already that has been replaced while the reports were being completed, which was a prime opportunity, and it was just, you know, a miss in the process. And exactly what that design threshold was for that bridge, I don't know. But, you know, so there's all those pieces of the puzzle that there's just so much coordination to go along with that. And because there's so many reports, it's a little daunting, we'll put it that way.
And Tom, I'm wondering if you can maybe go over, you mentioned how there's some other projects happening in the state. Maybe you can touch a little bit on how those are being coordinated.
So I'll use, and I think this was the case study that we used, and we continue to do even more work since we spoke a year or two ago when we were doing, say, like Buffalo Creek was one of the, I think the first one that we did. Sequoia Creek, for whatever reason, just because I think people are just outright tired of getting flooded, is one of those areas where, you know, the town supervisor, Sean Coletto, is the town supervisor of Whitestown, really took it upon himself and said, you know what, you know, and he's relatively, as far as a town supervisor, he's relatively young. I think I have a niece who is his age. And I'm what, 52. So anyways, he's young and he's energetic, which is great. But he's also too, he understands what needs to be done. And again, we did a study, this sort of predates the Resilient New York Streams program, but it's the same thing. You know, we did a study on Sequoia Creek and we identified, again, specifically what needed to be done. And at this point, we have not only done, you know, most of the work that was identified in that particular municipality. We have other municipalities further upstream adjoining, say, like the town of New Hartford, that is now very much interested and is engaged and is now just got awarded $3 million in FEMA funding to essentially implement some of the recommendations, you know, not in the town of Whitestown, but further upstream. So, you know, I can say from experience, this stuff can be done. But again, it really, and Mark, as you kind of allude to, it's a matter of sort of picking what your priorities are. I know there are a lot of projects. I know there were, you know, 7 watersheds that were done. But that should be a good thing. That's a good problem to have, right? That's where
definitely.
we've done those studies. Now it's a matter of saying, okay, municipality X, municipality Y, and I would agree with you 100%. Where you have those that infrastructure, I'm assuming that infrastructure, where it is in the queue to be replaced, that's the kind of conversations to start thinking about. Okay, if we need to replace a culvert or a bridge, here's the Bridge New York program, which provides 95% of the funding. Would you be interested, and this is on your list of infrastructure to replace, and oh, by the way, it's also identified as severely undersized infrastructure that's backing water up and is flooding your community. You know, it sort of adds, you know, you start putting, again, those pieces of the puzzle together to try to get folks saying, yeah, this is where we want to spend our time, energy, and effort. Or maybe it's not the infrastructure, maybe it's a floodplain bench. You know, we have the GIGP program, which is 90% funded by Environmental Facilities Corp. I just actually spoke with Brian Hahn, who was at my desk earlier today, and I actually mentioned it to him that I was having this call with the Erie County Water Quality Coordinating Committee, and he was very excited. He's like, hey, anything that any questions, if they're interested in doing projects, and I even confirmed from him that literally you can take the information that is contained in those studies and essentially package it together and put an executive summary together and submit it for GIGP funding. So it's not a whole lot of initial upfront design work that needs to be done. There's enough, if you want to call it, meat on the bone in those studies to be able to put together a project to essentially, if you want, convince or satisfy, if you want, EFC for funding these projects. And I've said before, they love to fund floodplain restoration projects. They find that those are really, from their perspective, a very meaningful green innovation, green infrastructure program practice that they really like to see more of. And literally, I have been encouraged by them to, as a result of doing these flood studies, to try to encourage then the communities to then seek funding. And that for folks that have worked with EFC, they are a very straightforward agency to work with. They're, some agencies may not be as easy to work with. I know I've had my problems with FEMA and the Corps, but I very much work very well with the Natural Resource Conservation Service. So I guess what I'm saying is I think the moons from a funding perspective are in alignment here, and programmatically, if the fact that we've identified projects that then actually can get, fit in with these funding sources only helps. And those funding sources in many cases are extremely favorable, particularly if you look at, the GIGP, which is 90-10. And, last year they had $20 million in funding, and they were begging me for floodplain restoration projects. And I told them I just don't have any in the queue right now to be able to send to them for consideration for funding. So that's why I want to kind of, if you want, not begging or pleading, but I'm more like pleading for folks to, again, maybe dust off those reports, work with the communities. I'm certainly there to help. I'm not going to speak for Don and Shannon and Stephanie and folks, but, obviously we spent a lot of time and money to sort of put those studies together. And as I said before, the last thing we want to do is sort of see them sit on the shelf. So to the extent that, Mark, you're willing to help out, that is wonderful. Whatever I can do to help facilitate, I will, do what I can. I've done that. I think we've been pretty successful in Secoit to the extent that we could do something in Erie County. Again, I have not done a whole lot of work in Erie County, but I'm willing to give it a try.
Tom, is the GIGP, is that the main funding source that you have accessed in your other project work that was completed?
Yeah. Yes. Yep.
Okay.
And like I said, Brian, I don't know if you know Brian Jory or Brian Hahn, but they're really good at what they do. And like I said, they see the benefit of these projects, and they're, and it fits their program, fits it like a glove, as they say.
All right. And when does that, so the GIGP, probably one of the other reasons is I am not as familiar with that funding source or have never applied to that funding source before. Is that one, when does that one come out through the consolidated funding application?
Yes. Yep. It's part of the CFA process. Yep.
Okay.
So I'm not going to put the county on the spot here, but I do want to mention that we have a few folks on the call from the county, and that's something that we can have an internal discussion on, especially looking at those county bridge projects or things that involve county property, and seeing if there's a way that we can internally see if someone can shepherd some of those projects.
That would be wonderful.
So I'll make the commitment to initiate discussions on the county level with no promises.
That works for me.
Well, and I think that's part of the coordination is really, I mean, who are the point people, you know what I mean? So once you kind of figure out what are the the main projects that kind of rise to the top, so to speak, then it's identifying, those folks that, whether they're aware of, this opportunity or the, the resilient projects that have been completed or, what their end result were, I don't even know if it's been, rolled out or, kind of worked its way down the line. So I think once you kind of prioritize them to some extent and then hitting those key people who in the communities are going to shepherd it through and push it. That's really what we need, and
Right.
where we need to start working towards.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, again, my experience has been a lot of this has to come. I mean, I can't come into a community and, say, hey, we want to replace this, we want to do this, we want to do that. I think I would be, laughed out of town kind of thing. I mean, I've been doing this for a while. Maybe when I first started, I thought that's the way the world worked, but I learned very quickly, no, it doesn't work that way, Tom. And, you can't force people to do things that they don't want to do. People got to want to be able to do those things that they want to do, right? So it's a matter of getting them interested. Again, like I said, from a funding perspective, at this time, I think we will have more money available, whether it's at the federal level. There's the $4 billion Bond Act that's being proposed. A huge portion of that is slated to go towards flood resiliency. And a lot of the other funding programs, like I said, EFC is clamoring to do, to try to fund these, particularly the floodplain restoration projects. And I know there was quite a few of those projects that were identified in Erie County in those flood studies. So, hopefully, the town of West Seneca will actually come in. Hopefully they'll have their design, formulated enough or cooked enough, so to speak, that they can come in. I'm sure they will, because, now from what I'm being, communicated to, that, they could literally take the information with just adding, like I said, an executive summary and kind of an explanation of what the project is, would likely get them, qualified, if you want, or eligible as an eligible project, and therefore the further design can be done throughout through the GIGP. So you don't really even have to come into the GIGP with a 30% design or anything like that. It's a preliminary design which can be essentially pulled out of the reports at this point. And that's why I tried to impress upon our consultants when they were doing these studies, is I need enough information that we don't have to then go through a whole nother round to to design these projects to then get, for them to then become available for funding. So I think we've passed over that. So to me, it's like, hopefully there's enough information and hopefully interest that information can just be packaged up nicely and submitted as part of the CFA to GIGP.
Tom, do you have any sort of a feeling on if projects locally would be competing against themselves? So let's say West Seneca is going to be applying and we're able to convince, maybe 2 other projects to apply. Does that end up hurting us because we've got 3 of these Resilient New York projects in the same round of funding?
Well, I'm sure they're going to be they would be evaluating them sort of on their individual merits. So if that's then sort of looked upon as being competing with one another, I guess it could be characterized. I guess that could be, but if they're submitted as part of a package and there's costs for each individual one, and say, for instance, if the town of West Seneca or Buffalo Creek, they wanted to submit, down by the Lexington Green area or further upstream, if they wanted to submit them as, say 2 projects, but they could be submitted as one application, but 2 separate projects, maybe that would take away the competition, because then the amount of money that they would have available would sort of dictate what they could fund and what they could not. So I don't know, did that make any sense?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering if, let's say, Town of West Seneca submits, but then maybe a project in like Amherst or somewhere else also submits.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need to like locally have discussions about which ones should be submitting in a year and limit it to only one town?
I wouldn't. I would encourage, folks to submit what they can, while, striking while the iron's hot. I know EFC did get an additional $5 million on top of their 15. So they had $20 million last year, which is the most I think they've ever had. And there's, I can't say for sure, but there may be the opportunity this year. I have heard some rumors that they may have additional funding along maybe those similar lines. So to me, submitting something, you know, you can't be denied if you don't ask, right? So, you know, my suggestion is to ask. And I would sort of bring up a situation where there was one stream that we did some work on in the Mohawk. They submitted, they did not get it the previous year, not this past year, the year before. And had they submitted it this past year, they would have gotten it, kind of thing. But for whatever reason, they had something else going on or whatever. They didn't reapply. But it turns out that they would have likely have gotten, you know, funded for it just because they had more money than they did projects. So hopefully that will never happen again.
And just so everyone's aware, I did start drafting a little Excel spreadsheet of potential funding sources for these projects that I will send along as follow-up to this meeting, just so that folks have links to these websites. And, you know, I'll highlight obviously some of the ones that we've talked about today that seem like excellent candidates. And I'm wondering, I see Stephanie's on the call, and I know that you had been working on a spreadsheet that sort of listed out the different projects. Is that something that we might be able to share with the committee?
Hi. So we are working on, you know, even getting maps, you know, to be able to pinpoint exactly where some of these recommendations are, you know, in the area. And so I think we will be able to once we complete all of that. And I mean, you know, we can share the spreadsheet, or if you would also like the maps, we can, maybe we can wait until then and combine everything and send it all together.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful probably for folks.
Yeah, I was just going to add real quickly that, you know, part of our intention with that spreadsheet, you know, that Stephanie developed was also to identify projects that would be likely candidates based on water quality benefits and potential candidates ultimately for federal Great Lakes funding as well. So as Tom said, there's multiple kind of state funding doors open. There's also a lot of federal opportunity too. And so, you know, just another offer of support. Our Great Lakes program is here to help assist and make those connections. Obviously, when it comes to the state funding, we can be less helpful when there's open, when the grant periods are actually open. But prior to that, we can kind of help point you in the right direction. And Joanna, I'm still good to, you know, put together some information on funding, the various funding programs for, I think, a future water quality committee meeting as well.
Yeah, I think that would be great for our March meeting to have kind of a discussion of those potential funding sources for projects.
And maybe what I could do also is reach out to EFC and see if they'd be willing to, you know, either contribute with examples or even be a part of it.
Yeah, just to add to that, Shannon, I did, like I said, Brian stopped by my cube here for something else, and he said, yeah, if anybody has any questions or whatnot, you know, Mark, and if you're reaching out to folks, they're there to help, sort of even, you know, not just to answer questions on the, you know, the grant side of things, but even from a project perspective, they're all hands on, as they say, of wanting to get, you know, projects in their pipeline, so to speak. And, you know, they're willing to help out whatever, you know, whatever needs to be done to help out. But I think, Mark, as you pointed, as long this only happens if there's interest locally to want to do it. And so to get the municipalities engaged and excited about this, to me is probably a pretty important component of this, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it would be good to do a follow-up to anyone who participated in any of those public meetings. Is there, like, I don't know if the consultant can share like an email list with me, and then maybe I could, once we have the sort of prioritization from DEC, or at least, you know, the ones that come to the top for water quality purposes, we can send out the potential funding sources. And I think maybe that's something that would be useful to municipalities to start to think about, okay, which projects should we be considering? You know, obviously they'll know more about their local area, but do you think that's something that like the email list could be shared?
So I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's been a while since I looked at, say, like Buffalo Creek. I think in the end, in the appendices section, there is a list of all the folks with their emails and contact information, if I'm not mistaken. I think Highland Planning included that as part of it. So I
Okay.
can take a quick peek and just confirm. And if it is, you know, all those as you've included on the agenda, there's a link to our website with all the flood studies that have been done to date. Obviously, all the ones in Erie County are on the website. So again, you know, whatever information that you need to help sort of generate interest, be more than happy to help. And Mark, let me know if there's anything that you need on my end to help, anything that I can help you out in working with the municipalities. Certainly let me know.
We appreciate it, and yeah, it's definitely something that we need to take a closer look at. And I think what it's really going to boil down to is going out and, you know, presenting to the town boards, showing them what this really means, and, you know, how to go about completing projects, because I think it's just outside of their wheelhouse when you look at, all right, you know, how are we going to apply for these? Do we have a grant writer? You know, who's going to administer it? Who's going to oversee the contracts? And it's just, it makes them uneasy, we'll put it that way. So sure. I think there's definitely some possibility. The Lexington Green site, as you referenced, I know is a priority, but there's definitely some extenuating circumstances in that neck of the woods. From my own
strawberry
perspective,
fields forever. Not
yeah.
hopefully the strawberry fields.
Pardon?
Oh, hopefully not with the strawberry fields that they were going to be putting the.
They were putting two ball fields at the south side of the Canisius football field. I went to one of the town planning board meetings there. Apparently, the last I heard, I actually just heard the other day that they might be moving them because they found so many cultural artifacts there. So I don't know, but there's other issues besides that. So
got it. Okay.
Maybe we start with a smaller scale one.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And I would just, again, drawing on my experience, it is literally, it takes, you know, the old adage, it takes a village. Well, it not only takes a village for, you know, for the things that people generally refer to, that it takes a village to, you know, to do one of these sort of projects. It takes a collaboration. And, you know, Sequoia, it's taken the efforts of DEC, DOT is very much involved in this, you know, the town, the village, EFC is involved in this, and it's a whole potpourri of funding sources that is sort of come together to implement, NRCS as well. I mean, it's not every day that you get $20 million from NRCS to do buy out and remove close to 200 homes. And then get another $13 million on top of that from NRCS to do the floodplain restoration project once those homes are done. And that's on top of the, you know, the $8+ million that has already gone into doing the floodplain restoration work in and around the town of Whitestown, the village of Whitesboro. So again, it takes, but the interest is there to do it. So Mark, if you have folks, some of those communities out there that are interested, certainly let me know, and I'd be happy to work with you.
Okay, thank you.
If there's anyone from any of the towns here today, if you're interested and willing to just pop on and mention from your perspective, what would be most helpful to move a project forward or to decide which of these projects might be best for your community? Even if maybe your town didn't participate in these studies or weren't included, you know, what do you think might be most helpful?
Hey, Joanna, it's Jason. Yeah, I'll chime in, especially with Boston being two hills and then the valley. It's a great topic for water and floodplain. But when I came in and took office as an elected official, we partnered with Labella to create a townwide drainage study, just because again of the topography, the floodplain management. There's just a litany of things going on in the community. I agree with Mark. It takes a team. Literally, it's not just a town board, but you're working with your local municipal highway department. Here in Boston, we're working with the Erie County Highway crew, the New York State DOT crew. We've got the bridges, we have the culverts, and all. There's so many facets to just one. I also say initiative. You really do need a lot of people at the table, and there has to be a desire to want to move these things forward. So yes, there's funding out there, like Tom was speaking to. And really, it was kind of truthfully, it's kind of a sales pitch of sorts to get my town board excited about talking about creating a drainage study that was townwide, looking at the possibility of creating drainage districts and other things, while also being cognizant that we have a lot of water that flows through due to the 18-mile creek, and there's a lot. It's a lot of time, and the other side of it, I guess I'll say, speaking as an elected official, not all elected officials are full time. So you look at whether it's board members or other key stakeholders. I come from the project management side. That's my professional side of me. There's a lot of stakeholders, and if they have a full time job, it is what it is. You have that almost instantaneous limited resource because some of these stakeholders may not be available until 4:30, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock at night. They're not available during the day to have some of these meetings, or maybe even be able to be available to temporarily jump on a call like this. So, there's a lot of moving parts, and I think it's just a matter of understanding it. Mark is certainly, I always appreciate all the time and effort that Mark spends with the town of Boston, but Mark has given me a lot of insight over the years, and certainly, there's a lot more for me to learn. I won't hide that, but there's a lot going on there. And are they challenges? And I certainly think there are, especially in today's environment where we're managing multiple other things, whether it's everything from a pandemic to other things. So now you get into the scenario of where does it fall on the priority list? Is drainage a priority right now today? That's the next. I'll deem it as an unknown. We try to keep that in the forefront just because we're always dealing with water problems. But each municipality is unique, and they have their own boundaries, which make them unique in their own drainage and floodplain management.
Thank you. Yeah, that was great insight. I think we forget that sometimes some of the elected officials, especially for villages, are just part-time and often don't have the capacity during the day to be coordinating this sort of a thing. I don't know if anyone from Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper is familiar with the work that's happening in West Seneca or wants to chime in on that at all.
Hi, everybody. Jean with Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper. Good to see all of you. I know that Catherine is working on the RFP for the West Seneca project, and so we're hoping to get that out soon. And it's great to hear that it's a project that's kind of risen to the top in terms of being able to see the phases of it get implemented. So excited about that. I don't really have too many updates on it, but certainly more to come, I would say, in the next month or so. And I'm happy to keep this group apprised as well.
That would be great. Thank you.
What does Waterkeeper submit an application for what?
I believe it was a NIFWIF grant that we applied to and got awarded to do some work. I'm trying to remember the specifics, Mark. I apologize. I don't have them at the ready.
Yeah, I heard that there was some. I caught wind of something of what was going on down there, but I don't know any of the specifics about it. So I'd be interested in it. But I knew the town was interested at somewhere along the lines. So.
Yeah, I can either connect you to Catherine, or I can find out some more details and get back in touch with you.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Of course.
Any other feedback at all or comments?
Joanna, one last thing for me here. I'm just thinking back to when I first started attending these meetings. And I feel like you guys had organized at that point into subcommittees. Maybe one was focused on beach health, one was focused on, I don't remember, something, stream bank stabilization, you know. And I'm just wondering if potentially a similar model might be helpful in advancing these conversations through this existing forum, ensuring that you have a diversity of agency, town reps, expertise, and so forth. So it's just a suggestion, just an idea.
I like that. Yeah. It might be nice to have, you know, at least one DEC person, maybe Mark, maybe a county person, and then maybe even a municipal representative from each of the towns where the projects are proposed, or if we don't get there yet, maybe just like someone from Waterkeeper who is pursuing a project, something like that. Is this something folks would be interested in, sort of having a Resilient New York subcommittee that maybe could meet occasionally and we could report back to the Erie County Water Quality Committee? How about if anybody would be interested in participating in a subcommittee, if you used the little icon to raise your hand? And then we could see if there's interest.
I'm thinking this might be a good actual LUPA application to coordinate and facilitate. You know what I mean? This is essentially this is what it boils down to, is that you need someone dedicated in order to sift through that data, identify the key stakeholders, whether they be landowners, municipalities, county, DOT, and then to facilitate those discussions to say, you know, because at this point, like I said, we're 2 years down the road, you know, half the town board could be changed. New town supervisors have been elected. You know, do they even know about this project or what was completed? You know, you might find that once they find out about it, they might want to say, hey, let's take this and run, which is what you hope for. But I mean, from a municipal perspective, I know that it's all going to end with, all right, what's the dollars and cents of it? And when you look at some of those projects, there is some pretty big price tags. So breaking it off into pieces that those municipalities can afford is going to be an important component. And that's part of the coordination effort of it, is to say, you know, hey, this is, and ultimately it's a $6 million project, but you don't have to do it all at once. You can do pieces of it. So what can we afford, you know, that sort of thing. So, I mean, it really is its own project to help to try to coordinate and facilitate the implementation of some of these. And I think that's really where we should be pushing, because it's going to take presentations to the municipalities. It's going to take presentations to, you know, the stakeholders, and, you know, pushing them along. And that takes time.
Sorry if I jump in. I want to just kind of talk about my success that I've had with you guys, you know, in the past. And when we had a public information meeting on a project, it was a Saturday morning, Joanna actually came out and we talked about all the benefits of the Water Quality Committee and LUPA and all that stuff. And we had the elected officials sitting, you know, hearing it firsthand. And the fact that we had a DEP rep there seemed to give it a little bit more traction. So from a municipality standpoint, like you got to have you guys at the right time in the right project, you know, and coming in and doing a sales pitch type thing, I can tell you from my experiences, you know, it almost has to come in with like the consultant, because half the time we don't have a lot of time to meet with people, and then kind of figure how this is going to plug in to the projects and stuff like that. So I think if we had a little more consultant participation in like these meetings, that when they write proposals to do projects for municipalities, it can be included into that. You know, Tom there was asking, you know, where to jump in, but coming to a board meeting and doing a presentation to a bunch of elected officials who don't have background in this stuff, I can tell you how many times the eyes have glazed over when I start talking technical stuff. So it's, you know, it's got to be watered down, and bottom line, they need to see the cash benefit and priority, like Jason said. You know, Jason talked about where it fits in the priority of the town planning. So that's just my 2 cents. Take it or leave it, you know. But I can tell you when we had our public meeting and like Joanna came out and we talked about a park we were building and you know, the rain gardens and stuff like that, you know, we got a lot of buy-in. Everyone bought into it a lot more. So you physically see it, you know, where the stuff's going, like the on-site meeting, like this is where it's going, this is what we're going to do, and they're going to help us pay for it. We got a lot of buy-in then. That's it.
You know, it's Jason again. You know, the other thing I'll add in, you know, topic of money continues to come up, but yeah, that is certainly a part, very probably the first and foremost part that could stall or delay, or even a board may not even decide to entertain a project, because if you're talking about a multi-million-dollar project, I now use the town of Boston as an example. You know, municipalities are faced with a 2% tax cap, and capital improvement projects are subject to that 2% tax cap. So yeah, hot topic, right, in the political world, in a political sense. But you know, there's been discussion, I'll say behind the scenes, for many electeds, stating that it'd be really nice if towns, cities, villages were excluded, or capital improvement projects, that is, would be excluded from the tax cap, just as they are for schools. A lot of people scratch their heads and want to know why municipalities don't invest a lot of money or spend money on infrastructure, and why our infrastructure is at the current state that it is. We're up against a tax cap, and you go out to the public and say you're going to override your tax cap by resolution, which is part of New York State statute, that you have to do these things as a board. I mean, you're going to get public scrutiny all day long, and that's another heavy component of this. So, yeah, I'll support that that statement there. Unfortunately, it does boil down to dollars and cents, balancing that budget and that wonderful world of a 2% tax cap.
Yeah, and Jason, this is Tom. We've certainly heard that in other municipalities, but thankfully, at least one of the ways to alleviate that is, you know, the Bridge New York program does seem to be sort of the go-to, if you want, for these infrastructure projects, so that doesn't, you know, count or doesn't, you know, put a major financial burden on the municipalities. If you can get 95%, you know, of a project funded through the Bridge New York, and the community has to come up with, you know, the remaining. I think that was developed in some cases to try to address that sort of situation that you were just describing. So again, we've, you know, I have a half a dozen bridges or so that are going in, and if we didn't have a flood study to demonstrate to them that, you know, that bridge is, you know, a major cause of flooding to the community, it's likely that, you know, that probably would not have been funded through the Bridge New York program. So, you know, I guess my recommendation is that, you know, you guys, the communities where these flood studies are covered, you almost have a leg up, because you can use that as the basis when they do score these. There is a component there that looks at the hydraulic capacity, and if you have a study that shows, okay, not is it only undersized, but that being undersized, it's causing and contributing to flooding over here, that sort of tells a much more compelling story as to, you know, why one could potentially qualify for, say, the Bridge New York program. And I think, again, going back to what I was just saying, I think that's some of the basis by which some of these bridges were selected for replacement was because of that. And again, having a study to sort of show that, at least in my eyes, kind of gives that particular community, I won't say an unfair advantage, but certainly an advantage.